So it's preparing to live stream. So come on in, everybody. It's good to see you. Yeah, we've got some people coming in. Hi, Casey. Good to see you. Dr. Sean, lovely to see you. We've seen a lot of each other over the last few days, haven't we? James, Joanne. On in, everybody. Oh, that's me again. I keep doing this. There we go. When it streams live, the volume comes up. So hello, everybody, and welcome. Come on in. It's great to see you. So this is the second of our sort of discussion panels with the contributors of Launchpad, the Countdown to Publishing Your Book, which is part of the Launchpad series. We had the first one. Yes, you're good at this. You guys are much more practiced than me. The first one was Launchpad, the Countdown to Writing Your Book. And now, of course, we have the publishing. And do keep your eyes peeled for the third book coming later this year, which is all about how to market your book and to find those all-important readers. But I thought we would maybe just start getting to know our guests today. And I'm just going to go as I see people on the screen. And Valerie, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little introduction to you and how you got into publishing.
Not a problem. Currently, people know me as a fantasy paranormal romance author, as well as the chief operating officer for Horseman publications. Erika and I have co-founded and run the company together, and we have many imprints, including Accomplishing Innovation Press and things. I started as a self-published author because I mix a lot of genres. That was the advice from literary agents, and I took that route. And then with a graphic design degree, I ended up finding my calling for typesetting and book design. Did that for many of years before me and Erika decided, you know what, I think we can make magic happen together. Let's start our own publishing company in January of 2020, bringing the publishing apocalypse. During the apocalypse apparently was not what we intended, but but we're still here. We went from 13 authors to over 100, and that's like 67 titles in the first year to over 300, 400 now. So it's been a huge thing. So that, yes, my journey has been quite an interesting one.
And so For Horseman has obviously grown. Are you still finding that time to write as well? Are you still able to keep up with that?
So the office knows me as the most intimidating writer. I've already written over 330,000 words this year, and produced 2 or 3 novels out of that, and other various little collections and things like that. But okay. Yes, I still make time. It's about making time, not finding time.
Mm-hmm. So no pressure for the rest of us then. Yeah.
No, no, not at all.
And Erika, what about you? What was your journey to publishing?
Now I wish I had gone first, because I haven't written 300,000 words so far this year. No, just kidding. So my journey, I started writing about 17 years ago, and I had a little literary group, and they did a publication. So it wasn't exactly self-published, but very similar to Valerie's story. We found a lot of things that didn't work well in the publishing world. I also am the host of the Drinking with Authors podcast that has gone on for about 5 years. And I also host a podcast called Eerie Travels, which is just weird and has nothing to do with writing. But I'm a horror author mainly, and I write under a different name, which is Dahlia Lance, for humorous erotica. But as Val kind of stated, we figured out that the publishing world was not necessarily wonderful for all authors. So we wanted to change that. So 2020 we started, and we've just been growing ever since. So my background is more on a corporate side, handling HR and legal and stuff like that for global public companies. So we melded together, but that's where we are. And I have not written 300,000 words so far this year, but I'm doing pretty well and have several stories and a couple of novels coming out this year. Because as Val said, you cannot find the time, you have to make the time to write.
I still think that's pretty impressive. I don't think that is anything to be taken lightly. You know, don't put yourself down there. It's more than I've written for sure. But I can see in the chat, Casey's saying I wrote about 200,000 last year and thought that was a lot. Well, Casey, you're going to have to.
That's where it started. I was trying to make sure I made anywhere between 50 to 100K. And I started hitting that consistently. And then it was 200K. And then I was like, I wonder if I could push myself further. And years later, now I find myself, if I make the time and I stay true to myself, I can push pretty hard, apparently.
Yeah. I'm going slightly off topic here, but just do you think that is to do with the sort of writing muscle? I often talk about a writing muscle, and in fact, it's not that it's ever going to be easy, but it becomes more doable the more practice and time you put in.
Absolutely. We always say it's like running or any other sport. You get better and better at it the more time you put into it. And also you have to, if you want to really be a writer, you have to treat it like another job. So you have to put goals and deadlines and things like that, even if it's for yourself. Otherwise, you'll never accomplish it. But yes, like we all get to be better writers. Well, 99% of us get to be better writers. And but you get faster and you find less things slowing you down.
Okay. Oh, I like that. You find less things slowing you down. That's great. So let's come back to today. Rob, I'm going to have to just make you host again so you can put your video on. So it'd be wonderful, even if you go off mute, it'd be wonderful if you could leave your video on just so that makes it smoother.
I thought it was on. I see it.
Oh, do you? Oh, it's me that's I see it as okay. Erika and Valerie, can you see Rob?
I see it frozen, Rob.
Maybe
that's, but
it's always where the IT is like, did you plug it, unplug it, and plug it back in? Did you turn it off and turn it back on?
Let me try something real quick. I'll stop the video and restart it.
Okay.
Well, now his video's off.
Whether it's 55 words or 550 words, Casey, they're both still good. Any writing is good writing.
It's true, but go faster. That's my job around here.
Hey, there you are.
Am I back on now?
You are.
Hey.
Now we got
live and in person.
Yeah. So Rob, likewise, tell us about your journey to writing.
Okay. Well, I have not written 330,000 words this year. I don't think I've thought 330,000 words this year. I'm a little older than the rest, so my writing journey's probably been a little longer, but I knew at a very early age as a kid in school that I wanted to be a writer. Went to college planning to major in English so I could become a writer. And then made one of the few good decisions I ever made as a teenager. We're not known for making good decisions as teenagers, but I decided to add journalism as a double major, so that I could get a day job until I wrote the great American novel and became rich and famous. And 40 years later, I retired from the newspaper industry after, so the journalism thing kind of paid off. But I always wrote fiction, short stories, tried a few novels now and then. In my 40s, the fiction bug hit really hard again. And I started writing almost full time. I still had a day job, of course, and wrote my first novel several times. Rewrite, learned everything I could about it, and went the literary agent route. That wasn't working out, and then I did land an agent finally, who then left the business, and so I was back on the street. By then, I'd written a second novel, and went the small press route, and publisher Evolved Publishing picked it up, and then asked if I had anything else. So I went back to the first novel, and they wound up publishing both of those, 2 more since then, and a collection of my short stories as well. And then several years ago, about I guess 15, 17 years ago, I started editing fiction, kind of merging my newspaper background and my love for writing fiction and the years I'd spent studying fiction, merged those two and found my niche there. So editing supports my writing habit. I'm a novelist, a short story author, a fiction editor, and writing instructor now, and left the newspaper business, and I write and edit full time.
Fantastic. Yeah, someone's saying you're a triple threat. That's what you are.
I'm a threat anyway.
Well, to our audience who are here, we've got people in the Zoom room with us, and we've got people, I am sure, on YouTube as well. You are welcome to ask any questions that you might have for any of our panelists, if anything comes up as we are chatting today. So please do let us know your questions.
Emma, I don't know if you saw, but Sarah, I think, is popping in, but we need to do the whatever.
Yay, Sarah,
thingy
you're
to
here. I
get
did
Sarah
it.
joined
Thank
in.
you. Sarah, I'm going to make you host so you can switch your video on. Yay. Yay, you're here. Thank you for joining us. In fact, you've timed it just perfectly. We can get to know you. We're just still doing our little introductions and getting to know everybody, but our viewers won't know that you're suffering, you're struggling on a Greek island right now. How's it going?
That's right. And I couldn't be outside because it's getting a little bit dark and it's very noisy because it's a huge holiday here. So I just had to, you know, position myself so you can see the big shipping lines and the pictures behind me. Yeah, I'm here with a group of writers running a month-long writing immersion, and it's beautiful and hot and balmy and just so lovely.
Perfect.
Such a treat to be here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing, publishing, and being an agent.
Yeah, so my background was in journalism. So I was a Fleet Street financial journalist, and I moved into magazine columnist and a TV news editor. And I was known as a humor columnist. And this is back in 2005. And I used to write really candid and revealing stories for the likes of Marie Claire, writing about everything from my crazy diets to my sex life or lack thereof. And I was incredibly lucky back then in that a publisher approached me, one of the larger publishers, and asked me if I could write a humorous book about a topic that was about parenting. And of course I said, of course I can write a book about that. So that was really my entry point into the world of being a published author. So my first book was a nonfiction, and it did really well, which was a complete surprise. And they asked me to write a second book. And my second book was also a nonfiction, also about relationships and parenting. And that book did really badly. In fact, I think if I sold 500 copies, it was lucky. And about 7 months after they published it, they phoned me to say, we are pulping your book. And do you want to buy back your copies or not? And of course, I didn't have much money then. And I said, I'll buy back 100, which are still in my garage. So that was my entry point. And then I really started working very deeply in the world of books. I started teaching at the university level, memoir, nonfiction, author writing, and coaching authors all over, editing books for a very long time. And what became a natural evolution, really, and I often ask, how did I get to be a literary agent? It was really just an evolution of my network after working with many, many authors and editing for many, many publishers over time. What happened was I was increasingly asked for books. So publishers would say, do you have any good books for us? Or I'd have a really great author. I could see this was a great book and the story was going to sell. And I would phone up any of my publishing contacts and start placing books, you know, with a publisher that would bite, that would like that kind of book. So that really was my entry point into that. And I continued my own writing journey. I heard Rob speak about editing, and I continue to edit and write because I think that's really one of the best ways to understand storytelling and how it evolves and what modern storytelling is, which is so different to 2005. You know, how we write books is very different. How we sell books is different. And what we like to read as readers is quite different as well.
Yeah, ever-changing market, ever-changing. Gosh, Sarah, I probably read some of your articles then. I used to buy Marie Claire religiously.
Sad to say, you probably did.
Well, I wanted to start with Rob. Your chapter is about editing and focuses very much on that. And you are an editor, you edit, but you emphasize in your chapter that you also hire editors, work with editors when it comes to your own fiction and your own stories. So given that you are an editor, why is it that you hire an editor or work with editors as well?
I think the key thing there is the brain. If you write it, you won't see things that might be wrong. Might be a simple thing like a missing word or a punctuation mark that's, gone wonky or whatever it is. Your brain knows what's supposed to be there. So when you read it yourself, that's what you see. And it can also be, when you're writing a story, you're trying to convey images and characters and emotions and the whole setting. And again, you know what it is you're trying to convey. The key is our readers seeing what's in your mind as you write. And you can't see that yourself because you know what you intended to write. It requires somebody else to look at it and say, this isn't working. I don't understand what you're trying to do here. Or what happened to that plot line, that subplot that you started in chapter 5 that's disappeared. You forgot about it. And your character in chapter 3 had blue eyes, and somehow in chapter 37, they're magically green. So everything from major story structure issues to the little stuff. You don't know how it's going to come across to a reader. And I think that's the value of an editor, is to really, take your excellent book and make it even better, and catch those things.
Yeah.
And I can't catch that in my own writing.
No, I think that's wonderful what you were saying there. I love that. It really hits home for me when you said, we see what we want to see, or we see what we intended to put there, but not necessarily what is there. And that's a really good distinction to make. So for those who are watching who perhaps aren't familiar with the different types of editing there is, I wonder if you could just give us a little outline of the main editing services that we might require from an editor.
Okay. Let me kind of start at the beginning. If you're in the process of writing a book, especially if it's your first book, maybe it's your first novel that you're attempting, and you're just getting stuck, and there's so many moving parts in a novel to keep track of, you might look for a writing coach, a mentor, basically, who can kind of come along beside you and help you through that process, make sure your story is organized and structured the way you want it, and can help you through the process to get to a completed first draft. Now, if you have a completed first draft, and hopefully maybe not the first draft, but you've been through it a few times or a few dozen times, but you want to see if it's all working, you can hire, an editor for an overall analysis and critique, or a developmental edit. How can I've finished this book, how do I make it better? And a developmental edit might help you come up with some ideas for subplots or increasing the tension and that sort of thing. And an analysis and critique can just kind of give you an overview of, here's the really strong points of your story. Here's some areas you may want to take a look at and strengthen, as well as the writing, the prose itself. A line edit is, you've gotten that far. You've got a solid book, and you need that editor to go through it line by line, word by word, or your everything from sentence structure to your description to your dialogue sounding natural and realistic for that character. And a line edit is the very detailed, let's get this thing finished and polished. And then the final step is, no matter how many times you've been through it with an editor, even have someone do a proofread, because during the editing process, like with a line edit, if I'm line editing, I'll catch a lot of typos, mistakes, whatever, but some will slip by, and I may even introduce some during the editing process. So you need that final proofread just to look and make sure there's nothing that's gone haywire, a misspelled word, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're exemplifying here, just, you're showing us how detailed it is and how involved it is, the editing process as a whole. Because I do hear some authors say, well, I've put my book through ProWriting Aid, I'm good to go. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a wonderful thing to do after you've done everything else. on your own and with an editor, and with beta readers, a critique group, workshop, whatever resources you have available to help you make that book the best you can make it. Sure, I use a software program after I've completed a book or after I've completed editing a book for someone else. I run it through a software program just to catch little things that we all may have missed. And so that's it's a good tool, but you can't rely on it. I've heard writers say editing's expensive, and it can be. It's an investment in your business as a writer. But I've heard several writers say, well, I'm going to self-publish my first book. I'm not going to spend the money on editing. And then once I have enough book sales for my first book, I'll hire an editor for my second. And I think that's one of the worst mistakes business-wise you can make, because if readers keep spotting mistakes and problems in your first book, they're going to leave bad reviews, which are going to hurt your sales, and they're not going to buy your second book.
Erika, I see you nodding along there with Robb.
So I think writers live and die by editors. They do. As much as a lot of writers think every word they write is a beautiful diamond that should be paraded around, but we have an entire glacier. As a writer, we have a glacier of a story that only a little bit is above the surface. And I find that editors make all the difference with you coming across not only just story development, but as a professional with correct grammar and correct pronunciation. Because I'll tell you, as a reader, nothing is worse than being thrown out of a story by something not making sense or being bad. And also, to Robb's point, as you won't read the next book. Like Kindle Unlimited, which has been great for a ton of authors, but Kindle Unlimited, if you ask people with Kindle Unlimited, they will tell you what they find on Kindle Unlimited and how quick they will go through and ignore books because the writing isn't good. So, you're a celebrity, you're an author when you put your name out there. Believe it or not, if your work is okay, especially on something like Kindle Unlimited, people won't necessarily remember you. But if your work is bad, they will absolutely remember your name. Yeah. Absolutely. Even if they find your story entertaining, say they read paranormal romance. I'm not calling that out, but there's a lot of half-naked dudes with wings and horns and stuff out there. But if you read that, a lot of people go through and they remember when they read the next book in the story, oh yeah, I read this. But they will tell you when they run across an author that doesn't know how, it didn't get an editor. You hands down, you will see that.
Yeah. And to piggyback off of that, one of the pieces of advice I often give authors who are intimidated by the price of editing is send a chapter. Send the very first chapter, and I guarantee you the mistakes you're doing in that first chapter, you've done throughout that manuscript. So piece it out, make it more tangible bites for yourself. And that way you can do as much cleaning as you can with the aid of an editor.
That's genius. I've never heard anyone suggest that before. So thank you so much. That's wonderful. Gosh, okay.
I would say, and to piggyback on that, what a lot of editors do, myself included, is we offer a free sample edit of maybe the first chapter or first 5 pages, so they can see how we work and make sure it's a good fit. And I completely agree. The mistakes and writing issues that I spot in the first 5 to 10 pages, I guarantee you will continue throughout the book. So a writer could take that free sample and go through and catch a lot of stuff themselves. That won't be everything, but they can make a lot of improvements that way.
Yay. Well, great advice from everyone. Thank you. That's great. So I'm thinking, okay, we get that book edited, we get it to a place where we're happy with, and we think we're ready to maybe start sending it out into the world. And so one of the first places a lot of people go to would be you, Sarah, would be looking for an agent and starting that big querying process, let's call it. And your chapter is about finding an agent or a publisher. And one of the things I really liked that you said at the top of your chapter was that you acknowledge that every manuscript you get sent is invariably at least 1 year of somebody's life. And I thought that was a nice thing just to acknowledge that. I know as agents and presses, you'll get so many coming in every day, every week, that I'm sure you become immune to the fact that the other person out there has got all their hopes and dreams on this. So thanks for acknowledging that.
Yeah. And that is quite something, because when that email comes into my inbox or a publisher's inbox or any agent's inbox, you know, we do see a lot of them. So you're very, I'm going to say, jaded, and you can see story very, very quickly. And it's really tempting to bash off an email going like something really obvious, like, I don't see a clear protagonist here, or, you know, what genre is it? This seems a bit confused. But it's really important to also realize that that they've put so much work into it. So to try, if you reply to these mails, because sometimes you can't, is to just say, you know, this is amazing, and maybe give a little bit of feedback, like, I've just noted X, Y, or Z. I have a few queries. Maybe you want to clear that up and resubmit it. So that's kind of the things we are always looking for. But speaking of the editing, I do want to raise the point that when at the point of submission, so when a book comes to me, there is an assumption that there has been editing and that it's grammatically correct and it's the best you can ever do, or that's potentially you've got somebody to edit it, but you don't have to if you send your book to a publisher. In fact, they will do that themselves. But, you know, we are reading. We're not necessarily checking your grammar. We are looking if there's a story. And the first question I always ask myself is there a protagonist that I'm going to buy into? Is there an inciting incident? And is there a really clear story goal? So I can see we're on a journey and I'm in. And I will get a manuscript in which grammatically is not perfect, but I'm invested already in the story, and I see they've got a story lined up. That's so the hook, I've been hooked. So the beginning hook is strong enough to pull me in, and I'll go, okay, it needs an edit.
But if you see a strong enough story and that there's potential there, you're happy to work with someone and get it to where it needs to be before it goes out on submission.
Absolutely. And, you know, publishers, particularly if it's an agent, if it's a younger author, and they've got good potential, they're going to come back to you. You know, I've just had one of my authors, and she's a young, amazing Indian woman, and she's written an incredibly epic romantic love story across 7 lifetimes. So a love story that played out over 7 lifetimes. And loads of publishers saw the potential in her as a novelist, but the story wasn't quite right. And they've said to one of the bigger publishers in the UK, have said, we're giving you a year to fix this.
Well, that'll give some people hope that there's it's not always cut and dry like that. Yeah.
Potential and good storytelling is very visible when you see a lot of books come across your desk. So when you spot it and you see talent, you want to work with it a little bit.
And you mentioned too in your chapter that submitting to 2 or 3 agents, that's not really submitting.
Absolutely correct. Submitting to either agents or publishers. I always suggest at every mail shot you go for about 20, because, and I liken it to Tinder, right? You can't just swipe right or is it left for one person. You're not going to get a date, right? So you've got to really, really put yourself out there to a lot of people, and maybe 2 of them will get back to you. So if you send out your book to 5 publishers or 5 agents, the chances are they're not going to get back to you because it's a numbers game. If you send it out to 20, you'll probably get 1 reply that may say, we kind of send us a little bit more, or thank you so much, we're going to look it over, give us 3 months. So it's a little bit of a hard market. It's quite hard to kind of keep putting a book out there. But it's just, you know, there's so many publishers out there. Somebody is they're looking for books all the time. They're looking for talent. They're looking for stories. So many authors get 5 rejections and then they crumble and think, oh, I can't do it anymore. But it's really not enough. I've just worked with a UK-based writer, and she wrote an amazing memoir. Actually, it's a tsunami story. She was caught in the tsunami, and she sent it to 40 publishers and 20 agents, and one has got back to her and said, can you send your first 5,000 words, which is about the first 2 chapters, which is a little door opening. It's not the whole door opening. It's not them saying, come on in and make yourself comfortable on my couch, but they're kind of just a little sliver of light. So that's the kind of numbers game you have to start thinking about when you start selling off your book.
Yeah, and you do highlight persistence in it, which I think a lot of us understand sort of intellectually. Yeah, we've got to be persistent in this. We know it's the long game, but actually in the day-to-day, in the reality of making all of those, personalizing all of those emails, making sure you've put in the correct guidelines and everything, that can be, even if we know it up here in our heart, it can be very difficult. But so I really appreciate the fact that in your chapter you emphasize the fact that we've got to be persistent. We've got to just keep going. Yeah. So Erika, 4 Horseman publications and getting published, and well, in your chapter you mentioned, I think this is not mentioned enough in a lot of the things we hear about publishing, and that the path that you take to publishing depends on your personality, ultimately.
Oh my gosh, it does. Oh, so we publish series-based authors. Just to give a little bit of a background, one of the things that's become very prevalent is that in order for an author to hit levels of success, they need to do multiple books, right? Every now and then you get a Fault in Our Stars book and it, hits the bestseller. But I think almost everyone on this call should agree that in order to be successful and have this, you have to have multiple books. I think it was BookScan that said it starts at about 6 books out, but really hits the ground at about 20, which can be daunting for people. And I'm not saying that's the journey for everyone, but there are metrics around everything in the publishing industry. If you do your research, you can find it. So, we look for series-based authors that are good authors that actually need we don't take on authors that need a lot of story development and approach to publishing the books. After we get a completed manuscript, the book is published within 6 months. So yeah, and it's published on ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook form. But submission is an interesting thing because we require that you've completed your first manuscript. And I think Sarah would agree with me on this. Don't be querying an idea that you have. Even if some people only want that, you need to have that very best version of that book that you're going to put out for query, whether it's to an agent, whether it's to a publisher. When we first began years ago, people would submit to us the first few chapters, and then we'd go, okay, about the manuscript, and they're like, I think I'll have it done in a year.
Okay.
But one thing we learned during growing the submission process is kind of what I joked to earlier, is some authors think every word they write is the most precious word in the entire world, and they can't, I like that Robb's smiling at that, they can't be edited. Some authors cannot be edited at all. They think everything is great. They also want to have so much complete control of their book. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't love your cover, you shouldn't love your blurb, you shouldn't love that, but all of that stuff is marketing. 100% it's marketing. Mm-hmm. It's what's going to sell your book and what's going to sell your book in genres, because I think all of us that read certain things, we can recognize a cover being in a genre we read, whether or not we read the title or anything else. We can tell by the look of it whether or not, like I write horror, whether or not it's a horror book. Val writes paranormal romance. There are broody, angsty boys on her covers. Like, you can tell by looking at them what the book is. The other thing is, there is a lot of work regardless of how you get published. If you have an agent, if you go with a mainstream publisher, if you go with a hybrid publisher, all of that stuff, there's a lot of work on the author that I think a lot of authors don't realize in regards to marketing. Just because you have an agent, just because you have a publishing house, even if you have one of the big 10 publishing houses, you're doing your marketing. Like, that's how that goes. Now, you might have assistance from people, but you're doing your marketing. How much control do you want to have personality wise in doing that? And those are the things I think are important when you're looking to decide what publishing route is best for you. Because if you are a type A personality that has to have complete control of everything and everything in your book, there is no publisher in the world that is going to do justice by you in your publishing journey. And you're just going to get mad about it because you will potentially think you know best and when you want it to come out and who you want to do it and things like that. And no matter how great the publisher is that works with you or the agent that works with you, there are things that you're going to have to give on. And if you can't give on those things, don't even bother doing it like that.
Yeah, you see, that's because I think when we read books or we read blog posts or we listen to podcasts about, oh, which route should I take? Often it comes down to book sales and how you're going to get your name out there. But I think not often enough it's about, okay, but yeah, what kind of personality do you have and what is the best fit for you? And what are your goals? Because the goals, I think, for each author will also be different and nuanced.
Yes, and I want to say something about that. So if you look at, say in my chapter, I list a list of what the sales have been like for the top 10 publishers, which when you read that, it's pretty terrifying for most authors. They get that look, right? Because being a self-published author or an independently published author is not going to mean less sales for you. A lot of people don't realize it's only like 10% of New York Times bestselling authors are making money on their books, because it costs a lot to become a New York Times bestselling author. Not that it's bad, but you have to go, what are my goals? If you want to sell books, there are different routes you have to do. And especially if you want to sell multiple books and everything, I think authors tend to get so excited somebody wants to publish their work that they compromise every bit of their things that they want and all of the stuff that they actually hold true to go, someone actually wants me. You know, Sarah made the joke about Tinder, but just because somebody also matches with you does not mean you should go out on a date with them. You know? So you have to decide what you want out of this journey. It's so important. And you have to decide, what are you willing to compromise and not? Some of these big publishers have constraints like you have to pull down your backlist. I talked to an author at the ALA, American Libraries Association, last year. Got a book out, wonderful, it's been on my podcast. The publisher made him pull down 8 of his books that he had independently published and said that they wanted to have him as a debut author. And I was like, well, that's just shenanigans, because he's not. But he got rid of the backlist, because if somebody likes you, they want to keep hitting the buy button. That's how it works. We get done with the book we like, we hit the buy button again. Every device allows us to do that. Every algorithm presents the next book to us. So if you have a backlist, that's where you'll make it. But he ended up having to give up all that. And then any other book he wants to publish has to go through their process first. And they have to approve even publishing outside of them.
That's quite sobering, isn't it? Yeah.
It needs to be. And I don't think it necessarily is, because it is hard to get published sometimes for authors. It's sometimes hard to find an agent. I mean, Stephen King's On Writing, which I absolutely love, is one of the most brilliant books. I mean, he had a nail and it had 157 rejection letters on that. It needs to be sobering, but it needs to be approached with your brain and not your heart. Said that earlier. If you do not approach this looking into the publishers. So yes, to Sarah's point, you need to swipe a lot of times, right? But don't just throw it out there. Do research. What does that publisher publish? reach out to their authors. Like there's a couple publishers out there that if you go on their site, they have 400 books, but they're all one book from one author, meaning they're not doing series based. They're also romance books. Like you have to look at what are they going to do and what is your journey going to be like with them. Again, you can query, but just throwing out queries to have, look, I did 25 queries, clear what Sarah said, you know, in the book, that doesn't do it. And I'm sorry, I'm not calling anyone out, but I'm just referencing your chapters, but that does nothing. Good, you've done 25 queries. That's not the metrics you want. You want to do 25 queries to agents that you agree with their philosophies, the people that they do. Like, for instance, if Sarah only did romance, she doesn't, but if she only did romance authors and you wrote a sci-fi, don't query Sarah. She may think it's a brilliant sci-fi book, but guess what? That's going to do nothing for you because that's not what she does.
Mm-hmm.
And don't think you're the unicorn that she's going to look at it and go, you know what? I've decided to change my entire business model and do this other thing. Not going to happen.
Sarah, I see you nodding along to a lot of what Erika's saying there.
Oh, she's speaking so much sense. Yeah. So the biggest fun, yeah, absolutely. Like just hit the right people. And publishers are incredibly niched in their genres. So are agents. You know, they're kind of like ponies with these blinkers on. And we do that because that's how books sell. So I just want to repeat that as well. You know, looking for a publisher, looking for an agent, be absolutely certain that they're in your genre.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they like and what they publish. And yeah, I mean, the only benefit, to be honest, in this day and age of getting a publisher is distribution in bookshops. Outside of that, pretty much electronic publishing, indie publishing has allowed anybody to sell books. And yeah, to Erika's point, it is not publishers necessarily that get books sold. But they will get you in bookshops, and that is remarkably important for some people. So that's quite strange.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, you know, we're moving a lot into digital buying. I think that hard books are still outstripping digital books, and I don't know if that's in any of the stats of the chapters. Erika, you may know.
It is true. I will say we're actually really surprised. So audiobooks are huge and growing bigger and bigger, especially since COVID, but hardcovers are selling equally. Weirdly, hardcovers are selling equally to ebooks right now.
That's amazing. I wonder why that is.
Well, I think people like I think people like touching books. I mean, that sounds weird, but they like to do that. And to the point Sarah said about bookstores, I just want to throw this out there. Barnes and Noble had a change of CEO, and who I think is brilliant, but he basically changed every Barnes and Noble store, which is a lot of the independent bookstores, to act like an independent bookstore. You can get your book in there whether you're independently published or not. But here's the asterisk. They have a requirement that there's a 55% discount and you allow returns.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be able to order from something like Ingram Spark or something like that, which is their iPage platform. So as an independent author, you can still get in there into these bookstores, but you have to understand how to do it. And how to do it involves what's called a one sheet and being able to go in and have your book meet those requirements. So yes, that can be great for publishers to get you out there, but that also doesn't mean that publisher is going to get you into the store. You still have to show up and do your due diligence to get your book in the store potentially, because Barnes and Noble, for instance, got rid of all their contracts with all the big publishers like that. So there's not a guarantee the book will end up in a bookstore. So if that is your goal, look into how that happens.
Yeah. So I'm just going to hold this up again. You can see, if you haven't got this book, that you need to get this book if you want to publish your book, so that you fully understand all of the different things that are going on out there and all of the different options open to you. So if you haven't got your copy yet, my dear listeners, really, this is a valuable resource for you. One of the, through the whole book, in all of the chapters, I think there was a recurring theme that was coming up, that it was really encouraging everybody to understand that this is a business and that we're in the business of selling books. It's you can be an artist with this, but ultimately this is about selling books. Valerie, what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you kind of recognize too?
Oh, absolutely. For example, in my chapter, How to Pick a Publishing Path, I remind everyone that this query letter that you're sending, whether it's agents or a big publisher or small publisher, whoever you're sending the query letter is, this is the same thing that you do as a job. That is your job resume. That is your book's job resume, right? You're trying to express, this is my skill set. This is the genre and audience I have written to. Here's what I'm about, or here's what my book's about. And this is why I'm qualified. That cover letter that you're kind of introducing and keep it tight and to the point, right? So if you're not going about querying as if you're applying to a job, and the same thing, and everyone touched on this, you need to be mindful of your personality and what your needs and wants out of this job, right? You need to be aware of who you're submitting to. I'm not going to submit to McDonald's and say, I want a cushiony desk job right off the bat. There's no McDonald's that can hire me or will hire me, or they'll laugh and then toss the resume, right? Because there's no such thing. Not unless I'm going for a corporate level and I did my research, right, of who I should send it to. And it all falls back. If you treat your querying like you treat your job resumes, and even then, change and adjust your query letter to match and play off of that literary agent and publisher, right? So when I submit my, typesetter resumes out, the last time I had to do this, it's been a while. I paid attention. What are they hiring for? What do they call that position there? Let me reflect that keyword. Let me trade out my keywords. What are they hoping to see? Ooh, this agent likes medieval. My book has a lot of medieval. So let me shift my tone to really bring up the medieval, because I do mixed genre. So I'm a little bit more flexible and have varying query letters to play up those mixed genres that I focus on. And that's what you should be doing. Your query letter shouldn't be cut and dry. You got one and you're done. You should have multiples that play to different aspects that reflect who you're sending it to. And that also tells that agent, that publisher, that editor, whoever sees that query letter first, that you read the website, that you were aware of what they are hunting for, and you made sure to layer those keywords in there. It is scary how much alike those two processes are. Everyone always goes into querying for the first time, like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm overwhelmed. I'm telling you, it is the same thing you do when you're trying to land that job. Just remember that this time, this is a dream job. So you have to be a little bit more picky and choosy a little bit, right? You want to make sure these are people who have the same values that you do. This is a company, you're going into a marriage. And once you sign that contract, it's usually anywhere between 3 to 5 years with that company. Sometimes that clock doesn't start ticking until publication date. So I've seen people who have been in editing for 3 years, and then the book's published for 3 years. And then you're crossing your fingers that it's done well enough that they renew and you can keep that relationship going. But you have to be aware you're about to devote years with whoever you're signing with on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they may cancel on you because of low sales and things like that. That happens all the time. But that doesn't mean the book is unsuccessful. The Alchemist is a great example of this. It's a big, famous book. His publisher dropped him because the sales were terrible. Now look at where the book is. You can't go anywhere. Jeremy Irons read the audio book. Like, that book has been one of the most translated books. It's just sometimes they don't get in front of the right audience or catch the right wave. Harry Potter's been out for years before it hit famous and Scholastics picked it up. I think she had been out for over 6 years.
Oh.
If you're going into publishing a book and expecting instant fame, that is less than 1% of this industry. That is a lucky strike. That's like hitting jackpot in Vegas, or hitting the lottery. You have to go into this. This is a business. This is a job. My query letter is my resume. and I'm going to pick who I feel I resonate the best and where my book can excel the best at. Just like Erika was saying, like, make sure that, you know, if I have a paranormal romance, I should be only sending this query letter to paranormal romance literary agents and publishers who I've looked at the website, that I've seen who they also represent. And I say, you know what, my book's similar, or my book's in the same vein as everything they're carrying. This gives me the best chance for the job. A janitor's not going to apply for a C-level HR resource person because he'll never be able to sell himself. But that doesn't mean you can't build yourself to that, just like everything else in life, but know your strengths and weaknesses and make sure that reflects in your query letter and the process of it.
Yeah.
But just remember that no matter what path you pick, whether you're going self-publish or anything, like Erika and Sarah and Robb have all applied, you still need to edit. You still need to double check. Have an editor look at your query letter. Give it a good clean, you know, show that you're putting your best foot forward as a professional, as a job. You know, like I said, again, you treat it like a job interview, like a job resume, and you're going to see a change in how things are going to go. I think the last time I queried personally as an author, I sent out roughly 56 query letters. I got 20 partials and 10 full requests.
Wow.
And a handful of rejections. So that says a lot. Like if you go at it like a job, you're going to see a much higher rate of success because they're going to see that you're paying attention and putting your best foot forward. Have a finished manuscript, have a very clean finished manuscript. They want to see something that is published ready. Whether you choose to self-publish now or later, you still have to get something polished and self-publish, you know, published ready. So a lot of that front steps that you're doing, don't be afraid to start putting yourself out there too. You want to make yourself more appetizing, but you've never published a book, start building a following.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, but I just want to say in your chapter, that is one of the things I did particularly like. It really hit home for me, that idea, that analogy of it being a job, and that it's your dream job as well. This isn't just a sort of college job. This is the job that you want. So I thought that was, I really enjoyed that. But also, yeah, you do talk about, one of the sections of your chapter is about building that reputation, even if you've not finished your first draft, even, you know, and you're not ready yet to be thinking about querying or publishing. For a number of our newer writers here might be thinking, well, what does that mean? How do I do that if I don't have anything to publish or to talk about? How can writers start to build that reputation that will ultimately make them more appealing to an agent or publisher down the road? So, for instance, when you look at and I'll keep going with the job analogy because it works so well. Like, as a typesetter, everything I have as a professional when I was freelancing openly and looking for clients, all my social media was typesetter someplace in my title and thing, and it was very consistent. And you see that a lot with a lot of people who are online reps or work remotely. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to create what we refer to it for Horseman as your author persona. This is, you want to keep it divided from your personal. You want to be able to keep your personal and your public facing versions of yourself separate. Even though you don't have a book out, doesn't mean you can't start creating your author brand, be consistent, see who else in your genre is doing, see what they're doing, because whatever they're doing is what your audience has already been introduced to, right? When someone, and it's just like Erika says, when you walk into a store, I don't have to read that title, see that author's name. I can tell from the colors on the cover what genre I'm looking at. And that's what you're going to do with your branding. You're going to find a social media you're comfortable with, or one that does well with your genre. And then you're also going to create a newsletter and remind people like, hey, follow me and I will update you on my progress. Like, oh, I queried, some more things, or, oh, I've heard back recently, or I got this feedback, or here's a snippet of something I've been working on, or, hey, did you guys know this? You share your journey. It is so shocking that people don't realize how much your readers want to get to know you
intimately. That doesn't mean you have to expose your personal business through your newsletters and social media, but you as an author, what you want that relationship to be, start building it in advance, because you are way more appetizing when they say, oh, this story needs some work, needs some polish, and then they look and they go, holy crap, this girl's got like 20K followers on this social media under a ready to go author branding. She gets it. She knows, she's already prepared to be a professional at being an author. And that's what it shows. Like, I'm not going to hire someone to do my tattoo if they can't show me how many times they've done tattoos before me. It's the same aspect, right? We're putting a lot to stake, and a bad book, bad press, things like that can go horribly wrong. Just like a horrible tattoo can't exactly come back off. So you go with that mindset of, this is a job, I got to be professional, and you want to make sure that you're showing that you've already taken those steps. And the best way for a new author to do that, or new writer looking to become an author, start building your brand. Show them that you are ready to take that next step already.
Yeah.
I want to jump in because I don't think a lot of authors realize publishers look at social media. We look at social media. I'm agents, Sarah's nodding her head. Look at social media. We go, because 65% of sales are going to come from author platform and word of mouth, which is book clubs, social media things, stuff like that. So if you go in and you have no social media except for pictures of your cat and talking about what tea you drank, but it has nothing to do with your cozy mystery book that you wrote, because you can tie that in, by the way, we're going to go, this person's not going to be able to market themselves, because, the great AI overlords, I jokingly say, the ad algorithms don't work the way they did 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. You can't just think, I'm going to throw a Facebook ad up, or I'm going to throw an Amazon ad up, and I'm going to sell my book. So we look to go, do you have your platform set up? Are you ready to go? Are you ready to do this? Because if not, as publishers, we know we're already going to have to get you established to even talk about your book getting out.
Yeah, I think I certainly find, and I'm sure I'm not alone, I find the idea of branding and marketing as an author, it does feel intimidating. It feels like there's just so much to think about. But one of the themes or trends that I think has come through, that I've been realizing through reading this book, is that everything that we do as an author in building our brand, in building our catalog, it's well, unless you can put a book out a month, which very few people can do, but it's a slow build that you take time to kind of establish yourself and find out what's working, what you enjoy doing, thinking about our personalities again. But is it okay if we take our time doing this, or is it got to be kind of let's get to it and get this thing ready to go in 2 months?
I think you need to get your names established, and that's covered in the next book in this series. But I think to Valerie's point, a newsletter, people go newsletters, but guess what? Email is not going anywhere. Social platforms change all the time. Facebook has changed, Instagram has changed, TikTok's being banned in different states. Like, all these things have changed, and we can go Snapchat. I mean, there were so many different ones. But a website and a newsletter, and you can do a newsletter once a month. You don't have to do a newsletter every 5 minutes. And trust me, nobody wants to read 20 pages of your newsletter. It's brief, it's discussing things, but get yourself established so that when you're querying and you're putting your book out there, somebody can go look and find and go, you have begun, you understand the concept. That doesn't mean you have to be on every social media platform, because different social media platforms work differently for different types of genres. It's just that, are you on there? Yeah. Have you established yourself on at least 2 of them, so that somebody can see you know what you're doing, you know how to post, you know how to interact with your audience.
Yeah. Rob, what about you? Have you found a need for social media and things? Has that sort of been a part of your development as an author over the years?
Well, over the last 40 years, I can say that I'm almost finally ready to become an overnight sensation. And again, social media didn't exist for much of that. But yeah, I've got I got very involved in lots of social media, and then I kind of pulled back from it to some degree, kind of focused it a little better. But if you try to be on everything, you can be accomplishing nothing at times. Find out, I think it was Erika that said, find out which social media works for your particular brand, your genre, that sort of thing. I write Southern contemporary lit. I don't think TikTok is where my audience is. So, I got to focus on what does work. And as far as newsletters, I think the best thing that I have found personally is Substack is out there. You can set it up for, if you have an email list, you can move it over there and they send out emails whenever you post something there. You can interact with people. And if you have enough followers and enough people who want to read what you have to say, you can actually charge a subscription fee on Substack. Now, I don't do that, but, because I don't have, if I had 100,000 followers, maybe I would, but it's a great way to stay in touch with your readers and have that platform to send out newsletters and regular updates. And then Facebook is, that's a lot of pictures of my dog and my grandkids. So.
Yeah, so it's ever changing, isn't it? And I think you're right. It is about being strategic with which platforms you use, because otherwise you can just spread yourself too thin, and that's all you do is social media rather than what we should be doing or where our focus needs to be, which is on the writing. We are at the top of the hour already. That's gone very, very quickly. I want to say thank you for your time to everybody here tonight. It's been lovely meeting you and getting to know you and learning more about what you do. So thank you so much. And our viewers out there, if you haven't, I'm going to put a link up where you can get the first one and the third one when it comes out. You've heard from our speakers today. You know that this is a good resource and it will only serve you well as you come up to publishing. I see some of you are querying and at that stage, so make sure that you're setting yourself up for success with the guidance from our guests today. I will leave it there. Now, just before we dash, is there anything anybody thinks I should have asked, I could have asked, that you think is important to mention, or do you think we covered most of the key points tonight?
I think we covered everything you could ever want to know about publishing, right?
I've been taking notes.
It's a good start.
Fantastic information, really amazing.
Yeah, and
Brilliant.
knowledge is power. I just want to say that. Get yourself educated. When you learn to do anything in this world, you have to get yourself educated so you can become an expert on how it works. So these books, for instance, there's 3 in this series. The third one's coming out later this month, are great resources, but don't stop there. Keep reading, keep educating yourself, not just on the craft of writing, but the business of writing, because it is a business. We've all said that. Rob, Sarah, Valerie, myself, Emma, it is a business. Never forget that knowledge.
What a great way to end. And I am just going to, someone's asked for the link, so I'll put it here as well as putting it in the description later when I go back and do this. But yeah, if you want to go and have a look, make sure I choose everyone. That is where you will find it. Well, I won't keep you, everybody, any longer. I know that everybody is busy. You've got things to be getting on with. You've got lovely evenings to be getting out and enjoying in the sunshine, Sarah. So do enjoy and take care, everybody.